This is the new tool with Tonic Studios. Like I said, this is something that's been in development for close to 3 years. An idea that I had when I first started out with Tonic, when I did the red-handled scissors, I wanted a rotary trimmer that could cut anything I wanted. And when you look at this and you're like, oh, it's a trimmer, I'm telling you right now, you're going to want to watch this live. If you can't watch the live, watch the replay, because you're going to want to know what makes this completely different than anything out there in the marketplace. All right, so this is called the Rotary Media Trimmer. What it is a rotary trimmer, but it is designed for all types of different mixed media and substrates. This is how it comes. It comes boxed. It retails for $100, so it does retail for $99.99. But trust me when I show you the value of a tool. Really, that's the most important thing. So I'm going to set the boxed one aside so I can get the real one out, and we're gonna take it through, and I will try to answer your questions and all that. So this is available now worldwide. Many stores have already received their orders. Shout out to Tonic for starting to ship last week. A shout out to the retailers that placed their initial orders and kept it quiet if they did get their orders in. So the cool thing about this trimmer, this was something that I really wanted because I wanted a trimmer that was designed to cut any substrate I had as a maker. And I love trimmers, don't get me wrong. I have, you know, many different guillotine trimmers with Tonic, decal trimmer. I love cutting things, but I also love the idea that I can cut whatever I want. And that's what this rotary media trimmer is all about, okay? A shout out to Richard at Tonic, really important. Richard is the guru that figured all of this out, the engineering behind this, because the great thing about this trimmer is it does cut up to 12.5 inches on the inside. It has two rulers that extend out, both top and bottom. We'll get into those features, so you can cut 12 by 12. But this trimmer, besides it's compact, is incredibly lightweight. It's about 2 pounds, 10 ounces, so just slightly heavier than this maxi guillotine, if you guys have this, which is not very heavy. So just to have a trimmer this powerful, this lightweight is pretty incredible, all right? So what makes this what this is? What makes this like, oh, okay, it's just a trimmer? Here's what it is. This trimmer has a geared rotary blade. And what that means is there is this aluminum track that this slides on, and you can see it slides effortlessly on there. But in here, it houses a geared blade. So there's a blade under there, a rotary blade. And most of the time when you have a rotary trimmer, you're the one like pushing the blade going, like a pizza cutter. You're the one keeping the wheel going. This one, because as it glides along this track, these gears are what's actually turning this blade. And so by turning this blade, this is what's going to cut through substrates. And when I talk about substrates, we're talking about different surfaces, different mediums. But before I get into what it cuts, let's just talk about the overall features. As you know, if you're familiar with any of the Tonic tools, I love this 1/4 inch grid base because I can easily cut squares, right? Each one is a 1/4 inch. This has imperial and metric on there. So imperial and metric, as well as two extendable rulers, so top and bottom. So sometimes people want to cut at the top, sometimes people want to cut at the bottom. Both of these have a stop, and you'll see when I go to trim that if you push this up, there's a stopper here, and if you push down, there's a stopper here. And these, of course, will support up to 12 by 12 of your substrates that you want to cut. It has this clear guide. That's what's going to keep your finger safe. It's also going to hold the media in place. And then we'll talk about the blade. So people always say, like, is it self-sharpening? Well, there's really nothing out there that is, quote, self-sharpening. But there are things that you can do in technology that the friction will keep the blade as sharp as possible. So we talk about that a lot in the guillotine. And yes, I do refer to it as self-sharpening, but technically it isn't. But the friction, this will self-sharpen, if you will, or keep the blade sharp of a guillotine trimmer. The same thing with the rotary. So unlike rotary trimmers that cut into something, this blade doesn't cut into something. There is a rubber track at the bottom, and that's just to hold your mediums, but it cuts up against this metal edge, and so it does keep the blade incredibly sharp. I've been working with this for well over a year, and have put it through its paces, and the blade has not dulled in the slightest. However, as makers, I understand that makers always want to know that there is an alternative if for whatever reason the blade dulls, or if you mess it up or something happens. So if you, for whatever reason, damage your blade, you can buy a replacement carriage. And so the reason it's a replacement carriage is because of the technology in this blade carriage. It's more than just a blade because of the gears. We just felt that if it came to the point where you would want to replace this, you would also want to have the new gears. This replacement carriage is the entire unit right here. This replacement only retails for $15.99, which is incredibly cheap for the blade technology. It comes with an Allen key, and all you would do is go in and remove this little screw right here, lift up one edge of that aluminum rod, slide the carriage off, put on the new carriage, put that back in, and you're off to the races. But I have yet to even think about replacing the blade at this point. But again, it depends on makers and how makers work. So we'll talk about the build of this. As I mentioned, it's very lightweight, easy to use, but it is also designed, engineered with a reinforced support. So the bottom of this has this metal bar that supports this entire cutting apparatus, if you will, because what it cuts is the coolest thing and what makes this rotary trimmer all that it is. What does it cut? Well, we'll start with the basics. It cuts paper. Let's be honest, it cuts paper. And I'm going to demo all this. So it will cut watercolor cardstock. It will cut heavy stock. So this is like 130 pound or really 350 GSM. But it will cut up to 3 sheets of this simultaneously. It can also cut synthetic things. So if you, and we're going to demo all this, so don't worry, I'm not just going to talk, I'll also show, but it cuts all the synthetic things. So Yupo, Duralar, Durabright, acetate, shrink plastic, any plastics you can cut in there as well. Coated paper, sparkle paper, metallic papers, it will cut that as well. Of course, it can also cut thinner things like vellum. So even if you think, okay, this is a heavy duty trimmer, but will it cut things as delicate as vellum? Yes, it will cut vellum. But really the whole push behind this trimmer for me as a maker is I wanted something for mixed media stuff for cutting cork, cutting corrugate, cutting chipboard as in 22 point, which is kind of the thin chipboard, or a 50 point chipboard, 0.05 inch chipboard and or mat board. So yes, this trimmer will also cut mat board of the same thickness, right? So that's going to be 0.05, okay? And I think that to me is super important to recognize that this is more than just a paper trimmer. Yes, it's a paper trimmer, but it's also for different substrates. It will cut chipboard, mat board, cork, but this is the other thing that it cuts. And I know some people you're going to get a little freaked, but you know what? You're just going to have to inhale, exhale, and deal with it. But the inspiration for this was back in the day, I had this product called Grunge Board. And that was the very first time I went to Tonic and said, wouldn't it be cool if you had a trimmer that could actually cut this substrate? This substrate is just slightly thicker than 0.05 like the chipboard, but because it's flexible and fibrous, I couldn't cut this with anything, other than scissors or a die, but you couldn't use any trimmer on this at all. And we just couldn't find anything to cut. And yes, if you have Grunge Board and you use Grunge Board, the rotary media trimmer will also cut Grunge Board. Even though this has long been retired and it will not be coming back, if you have it, it will also cut that. So let's get into the cutting and just kind of talk about it. And I'll do my best to answer questions. If I've already covered them or if I don't plan to cover them, we're going to kind of go in and take a look at it. So when you cut, you can cut from the bottom up or from the top down. Completely up to you, because as this goes along the track, again, this geared blade carriage is going to rotate or continue to turn that blade. If you're working on scrapbook paper, maybe you have 12 by 12, you can extend the arms. You can, these have little feet at the bottom, so you can bring one of them out, and they kind of, I'm going to say they almost like lock in place, meaning if I pick up the trimmer, they're not going to go flopping around. So for whatever reason, I don't know why you'd want an angled one, but you can place these guides down. I'm going to do my best to try to keep this in camera. I've zoomed out as much as possible to keep my arms in. But all you're going to do is you're just going to place that surface in. Again, you can rest it along that top edge or along the bottom edge. So either one, again, it depends on how you want to create it. The surface up here is going to have up to a 6-inch mark. You can see right there, there's your 6-inch. So it is nice if you do scrapbook pages or you just want to cut 12 by 12s. It was important that you at least had up to that measurement on this platform without worrying about the extended ruler. So most of the time, you probably won't need to extend these unless you're trying to trim something off of the other side, okay? To use it, we're going to talk about the blade carriage. That's really important. This blade carriage, if you see it, do you see that little wiggle? It is designed to have a wiggle. So when you get yours, and I know people just like to take stuff out of the box and go, oh, something's wrong with mine. You haven't even used it yet. It is designed with the wiggle. The reason is is because different thicknesses, different materials, this blade carriage needs to adjust its cutting ability for not only the paper, but also chipboard or corrugate or cork or anything like that. So when you go to cut, you're going to place this down, use this guide to really hold that substrate down, rest your hand on this carriage. Resting your hand meaning it's very ergonomic, so you can put your thumb right there, just rest your palm. And what you're going to do is put most of the weight, you don't have to use a lot of force, most of the weight on this outer side so the blade is resting against the metal edge. And then you're just going to just drag it right over the top and it's going to cut. And it's going to cut really clean. And if you're into clean sounds, you're going to hear this trimmer. It just slices through things. Okay, so 12 by 12 paper, that's the easy one. But let's just get into the good stuff. Okay, so we'll talk about watercolor cardstock. I love cutting watercolor cardstock, and I'm taking stuff out of the package just because you'll be able to at least remember what I'm doing. So this is 118-pound watercolor cardstock. I'll take a sheet of that out. So if I wanted to cut this, I'm just going to fold these in because I really won't need. It is a very satisfying sound. Wait till it hits chipboard, then you're going to be like, woohoo. Okay, so as with the Tonic trimmers, if you're familiar with them, this gridded line, there's also this little dotted or this dash on the grid. That's going to be at 5.5, and that's also going to be at 4.25. There's other card marks, but those are the two that I mainly use, especially if you do a lot of A2. So I can put my first one, just goes to 5.5, place that, slide that. Again, this is 118 pounds, so now I can stack these up. I can bring them down to the bottom if I want. It's totally up to you. And I can cut the other way. So now I have quarter cut watercolor cardstock super fast. Okay, if for whatever reason you wanted to cut more of that, I would recommend no more than 3 layers of cardstock up to 130 pound. Keeping in mind, let me actually grab some. We can do white heavy stock. So the heavy stock, the white, the craft, that's going to be 130 pounds. So I'll get that. It's going to be thicker than watercolor. So let's go in and just do that real quick. Now, if you want to always cut to the top, you can just see how I just push that down, cut up to the top. So now we have 4, but let's say you wanted to cut more than that. The cool thing about this trimmer is it's pretty smart, meaning if you have too much stuff in here, most likely the trimmer is going to stop. Even if you have some good force, it's not like you're going to strip the gears and break it. It's just going to stop into the substrate and you'll know like, okay, I shouldn't be cutting this, and you can back out. The more that you have, meaning the more stuff you have layered, the more your cut is going to be what I'll just refer to it as chewy. So this is 3 layers, but I still get a really beautiful, clean cut. But when I say chewy, it means sometimes you can have, see, it's like almost like a little paper dust that wipes off with your finger. So it's not a jaggedy cut. It just means you'd have to like clean off that pulp. But this was 3 layers of 130 pound or 350 GSM cardstock that it just sliced through. Any more than that, I'll show you 4. It just wants to stop. Now, I saw a comment about adhesive. What about adhesive? Well, as with any trimmer, if your adhesive is wet and gunky, your blade is going to be wet and gunky. But if your adhesive, say, already has the backing still on it, then you can cut through it no problem. Because unlike a guillotine, I often have issues with a guillotine. I'll bring in the one that I normally use. Because a guillotine's cutting motion is that friction slice. So when I would cut things like, say, Xyron or adhesive back, because this is like pushing through, I would often get gunk on here. And this is literally cutting through it like a saw blade. So you get a much cleaner cut because remember, that's a geared rotary. So I found, because I have been cutting Xyron or adhesive backed paper, that it's very simple to just go in and slice through that without getting any adhesive buildup. But you know, there again, if you've got tape runners and you have gunky stuff everywhere, I mean, gunk is gunk. So this is now going to be 4 layers. So watch what happens with the blade. See how it just stops? You just back up. Means like, nope, I don't really like that. So you just remove one of the layers and then you could go in and finish your cut. Okay. So it is a smart trimmer in that aspect of, well, what if I have this? What if I have this? What if I have this? Well, if it's too thick, chances are you're not going to get the blade carriage to go through it. You can just back up and then you can finish your cuts. So this is, we're just talking about cardstock. Now I did see somebody mention about crooked cuts with a guillotine. Here's just something to keep in mind with any guillotine. if you work with the guillotine, a lot of people like to work from the top of the guillotine, and I talked about this to Jennifer McGuire as well, because a lot of times people just, for whatever reason, you want to work from the top. Not only this, but even on the decal, where some people have an issue with the top of that decal being smooth. When you work at the top of the guillotine to cut, you're right. The force of that blade wants to angle this paper out, even just slightly, to get a wonky cut. Remember, the guillotines have that bottom resting edge, and so by using that instead, it takes a minute to get used to, but once you do, now you're using the actual leverage of this to push against this guide, and you always get a straighter cut. So when I cut on the guillotine, I prefer to cut on the bottom section because I'm always getting a straighter cut. So if you're having trouble with that being crooked, start working from that bottom edge instead of the top edge, especially on the, but it's only this size that has the bottom edge. The large and the mini does not. But this one does. That's why I wanted to include that, because you can work, you know, either way when it comes to how you want to slice. So that was just cardstock. Now let's get into synthetics. We'll get into things like Yupo, Duralar, Durabright. I'm actually going to cut some things that are already inked, because to me this is all about, like, as a maker, well, how are we going to use it? So if you have an alcohol inked background, this happens to be Yupo Heavy Stock. I can place this down, and what I like is you get good visibility of this, right? So I can see exactly where I want to cut, because the edge of this clear guide, that's going to be your cut. But you can pretty much just eyeball where you want to slice this, or you could be a measurer. I think it's important just to cut. And this is Yupo. I mean, you saw that it was like effortless just to slice through Yupo. And the other cool thing about this trimmer is, let's say you wanted to do strips of something, strips of cardstock. Because these are 1/4 inch, these little grid marks on here, you can start and just take this, move it over, and you can just keep going back and forth with 1/4 inch. So if this was regular cardstock, watercolor, you could do 1/4 inch, you could do 1/2 inch, and you just have this beautiful set of strips. This happens to be Yupo. It's pretty incredible how sharp this trimmer is, especially on something synthetic. So now we'll get into, say, Duralar, or in this case, it could be something like shrink plastic. But this is Duralar, so it has that crunchy shine to it. Easily trimmed. Look at that. Simple. So simple to cut with this. So synthetics, no problem. It's just going to cut right through it, because again, you're not dragging a blade through it. You're not trying to cut something like that. You're literally slicing through with a rotary blade. And what makes it so exciting, especially, you know, I've been making for many, many years, well over 20 years. But sometimes you have tools that just make what you do every day easier. And as makers, we cut things. We cut card bases, we cut chipboard, we cut cork, we cut all sorts of things for our makes. Now, if you don't want to use the top or the bottom edge, because whatever piece you're working on, you, for whatever reason, want to work in the center, there is a centering ruler as well. So you can just take that substrate and say, okay, I'm going to go at 3 inches, and I can hold that there. This is where you're going to need to use that guide to hold the medium. I often rest my thumb under that edge as well, and then you can slice that. So this one happens to be adhesive-backed cork when you're asking about adhesive, but see, it has a release paper on there. Or maybe you wanted to do corrugate, right? This is also adhesive back, so this happens to be adhesive back corrugate. These are old school ideology substrates. Love that. But we're going to get into the thing that matters. This is like the thing I always love to show people, like chipboard. Because cool. This is what it is. So it's chipboard. So when we talk about a 50-point chipboard, we're talking about like the back of a notebook. That would be kind of your average chipboard. Or mat board. This would be like your industry standard, and that is referred to as 0.05 inches or 50 point in the chipboard world. So this is definitely the thicker stuff. This is where you're going to get a sound. So this one, it is going to take a little push. So I always like to get a head start on this. You don't have to take a running start, but a head start. And again, you always want to make sure that the blade carriage is resting against that metal. So you're not putting your hand here, you're holding it, because it's a little cush grip on here, similar to the scissors. And then you're just going to slice right through that. And that is 0.05, 50-point chipboard. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, that's just a big cut. I'm going to just do everything that I do, even like we've done guillotines. This is slices of chipboard. Look at that. It's so sharp that it just curls this. And this isn't like I just took a new trimmer out of the box for this demo. This is the trimmer that I've been working with. It's pretty miraculous of how it could cut through something. Yeah, and there are some makers out there that have received this. I was able to get a small pre-production batch. So this happens to be matte board. So now we're just talking matte board. I know, it's crazy, right? So let's just take this raw edge. So there are some makers out there that got their hands on it because I didn't want to be the only one going, this is amazing. I wanted to see, like, what did other people think, you know? So what I did is I just cut the jagged edge off of that piece of matte board. So I had a straight edge. And then you can just place that in the trimmer. And you kind of hear, you're going for it. Just depends on, you know, how you want to cut through that particular substrate. That's pretty thick stuff. But after cutting through that, you can still go to, I'll just take a piece of vellum. Because that was the other thing, you know, sometimes, as we know as makers, like let's say we have these scissors that are just, you know, they're like our durable scissors. But then when you go to cut something really thin, it doesn't cut that. And I still wanted the ability to just be able to cut through anything thick or thin with this trimmer. But now let's talk about the mixed media side of it, because now I've just been kind of dealing with substrates, and I will get a piece of grunge board because, well, we know, if you know grunge, you know grunge. If you, just say if you grew up loving grunge, then you know grunge. You can smell it right now, smell-o-vision. I smelled it. So, did you? Yes. So grunge board was a very fibrous material. So that was the challenge of this. And this stuff, it's like, it's pretty unbelievable how it can cut grunge. And even, again, if I want to just go in and let's cut some little thin pieces. So for people that do like junk journals, books, and want to do covers, like pretty crazy. Will it cut aluminum? Well, it's not meant to cut metal. It's not a metal cutter, but if you're talking like aluminum foil, yes. But if you're talking about rolls of sheet metal aluminum, no. This is still for mixed media. But like the metal foil tape, absolutely it will cut that. So pretty, and look at that cut of, look at that on grunge. Thin, thin. So the mixed media side, and this is really what I want to talk about. Does glitter paper ruin the blade? There would be no reason, because if I just cut synthetic paper, which is plastic, glitter is plastic, so no, it would not do that. Glass glitter, I wouldn't recommend glass glitter because, again, this isn't a glass cutter either. But if it's just standard glitter, that's not a problem because it's plastic. But that's why I wanted to bring in this box, because I'm sure people would be like, what about embossing glaze? What about texture paste? What about crackle paste? That was the other thing that was super important about this style of trimmer, a rotary trimmer versus a guillotine. Because you could argue like, okay, I could still cut cardstock with my guillotine trimmer. I found that when I was cutting through mixed media backgrounds, things that I had done paste, or in this case, this is embossing glaze, a guillotine would often fracture it off or get stuck. When I would try to chop with my Tonic guillotine, it would get stuck in some of this area that's really thick. So this one happens to be texture paste and distress embossing glaze. The cool thing about a rotary media trimmer is that it will cut through all types of media, even your embossing glaze, without chipping it off. It just slices through it. So if you had, so let's say this one happens to be crackle paste. So I often demo on tags and people go, what do you do with tags? Well, tags could be anything. So I can take this tag and let me cut off the reinforcer, and then I'll just say, okay, I'm gonna do 2 different card fronts. So maybe I'll cut it right there, place it at the top, and look at that. Totally clean through that paste and that glaze, versus a guillotine that would kind of chip away at that stuff that is cutting. So if you talk about just texture paste, so this is pretty thick texture paste. Again, texture paste has a tendency to flake or flare. I'm gonna just do the same thing, but now I'll just go in and cut strips of this background just to show you. Look at that. Isn't that crazy? It's so cool how it will cut through. So grit paste, clear paste, texture paste, even something really thick. So this is translucent grit paste, which we know gets super thick, and then we heat emboss over the top of it. It's gonna cut through that. All that thick, chunky stuff. So if you have like your ultra thicks, your other powders can totally cut through that. And let's talk about collage. So if you're doing collage, so collage is often backgrounds, layers, layers, layers. So this is where you can build up multiple layers, where you think from mixed media, well, why would I have all those other cutting things? So here I can take this background, and maybe I want to trim right down. I'm going to go right over all of those layers of collage because maybe I wanted to just straighten everything out. So it's still going to cut through that layer, and that layer with ease. Pretty wild. That to me is so cool. And then as you're going, will cutting paste get the blade dirty? It won't if the paste is dry. You're cutting through dry mediums. We're not cutting through wet gunk. So if you're cutting through wet gunk, you cut through wet gunk, and I don't know how you're going to clean your blade because your blade is housed in a carriage. That might be this type of thing, but you should never really be cutting through wet mediums, not wet glues, not wet paste. This is all dry stuff. So if we talk about embossed paper, another thing that I really like about a rotary trimmer when you're cutting through embossed paper is that you don't have to worry about ever flattening out that embossed design, where we talk about using an embossing folder. So this is just done with mica stain, so that's just going to be ink, no problem. But see how everything is still left puffy and dimensional? It's not left where, it's almost like a little seal-a-meal where it makes a little pocket when you use a guillotine, because it often flattens that out, where that just keeps that design. Again, a rotary. Your metallic papers, same thing. So we'll take this skull, and maybe we want to take this skull. I'm just going to actually measure him. So let's cut him into, say, 1/2-inch strips. So I'm just going to use the grid line here because we started at 4 1/4. So I'm just going to do 2 squares each time, just moving this down. And again, you can just use the blade either direction. So this is going to be your embossed paper. This is metallic. And then you could kind of rebuild or restructure this on a card to kind of build that over a black background. Or just if you were doing industrial stuff, you can use it. I just think that the detail and the fact that it keeps all of that dimension, that to me is the magic. So when I see a couple questions about textiles and fabric, this is not meant for textiles. That's where you have a rotary trimmer where you're pressing in to cut the threads. Could you cut something like canvas? If you had a thin canvas that was adhered to something solid, you'd be okay cutting it. But if it's just fabric or felt, that's not what this trimmer is for. This is designed for firm substrates that the blade could actually cut through like a saw. That'd be like, imagine taking a piece of fabric and putting it into a table saw. It's just going to take that and just try to wind around it. It's going to be the same idea. You need a firm substrate to be cutting through, whether that's going to be cardstock or chipboard. So again, if you had, say, sticky back canvas, you would want that sticky back canvas stuck onto something. Someone asked again about adhesive back stuff. I did do adhesive back cork, adhesive back corrugate. So these are all adhesive back. So yes, as long as you still have that release paper. It's pretty amazing just to see all of those things that you can cut through that. All right, will it cut through an etc. tag? No, it will not. Etc. tag is a paper board. Those are laser cut. So think about that. Can you die cut an etc. tag? No. Even with a steel rule die like a Biggs? No. Because it's laser cut paper board. So we're talking up to...
It's like wood.
Yeah, we're talking up to 50 point or 0.05. So that is your visual thickness. An etc. tag is way thicker. This would be the thickest substrate that this is designed to cut. There you go. So that should definitely help. But I mean, the great thing about this is that you have cool backgrounds to use for other things. I see people that have issues cutting backgrounds. Then obviously you're a background collector. I'm a background user. I love to use different elements because this great little strip into a card, put it under a sentiment. It's a great way to use up all of your components and pieces, but it's also a very cool way that you can take little fragments and add them to newer things. Backgrounds are backgrounds because they're meant to be in the background, and having elements that you can cut through, well, that's the beauty of this. So we're going to do this poinsettia one. Let's just slice this one. All right. So often when I use this, you see I kind of go from top to bottom because I don't like to reset, but you can. Sometimes people are just that sort of thing. That would be absolutely fine. So we'll take something like, I don't know, we could take some thicker cardstock. So this is sparkle cardstock. This one is about, let's see, 100 and, I don't know what this one is. I think this might be 110 silver sparkle. But this is a synthetic paper. So this is for alcohol ink. Again, you're going to just slice right through it. If you have anything synthetic, I see a lot of questions about glitter. I don't know any company that makes glass glitter paper. So all of your glitter cardstock are going to be plastic. So that's going to cut through just fine. The same way, if you've been watching the demo part, this is all plastic. Embossing glaze, plastic. Heated up, hard plastic. And this cuts through it, no problem. So if it can cut through texture paste with heated embossing powder that is plastic, it's going to cut through flaky glitter, no problem. So that's the importance of like watching the demo and understanding synthetic mediums, because it does open up the possibility of so many different types of mixed media things that in the past, sure, we've gone in and cut it. Maybe you're trying to use a craft knife or you're going in and, you know, using scissors. But the fact that we can cut through this texture and still get that clean edge, that to me is the beauty of a rotary trimmer versus a friction. I'm not saying you can't go in and use your craft knife and scissors. We still have all those tools. I'm just explaining why I wanted a trimmer like this for how I like to cut certain things. And I think in the mixed media world, especially for people that do all types of journals, junk journals, mini books, you often can find chipboard, or you can buy chipboard. Just make sure when you're buying it, it's referred to as 50 point or 0.05. This has 2 arms. That's why I showed at the intro. So it's got 2 guides. So if you wanted to cut this piece of chipboard, so we know that this is 8.5 by 11, but you said, okay, I want to have a 2-inch strip. It does have a 1-inch mark on this edge. So you can see it goes up to 1.25 inches, but I would say it's got an inch line straight down. So if I was doing a 1-inch strip, I could use this guide to say, okay, that's going to be my 1-inch strip of chipboard. But if I wanted to cut, say, a 2-inch piece, then I can use this extended arm and say, all right, so I've got, it's at 10, so I'm going to bring it down to 8. So now I know I have that 2 inches at the end. So yeah, having that arm top and bottom, again, it's going to determine what type of cutter you want. Again, whether you're doing smaller strips, 1/4-inch strips, 1/2-inch strips, 1-inch strip, and again, this was chipboard. So you kind of heard that really good chunk. It's amazing. And it really is just about kind of getting comfortable with this carriage. Because when you first put it on, you're like, oh, this feels wiggly and loose. You know, people are used to that, like scissors. You're like, oh, my scissors are loose. This is really about like placing this down, and it's really just the simple weight of your hand. You'll see, because it's ergonomic, it automatically pushes that blade up against this metal edge, because you're not cutting into this plastic. Like there's certain cutters that are designed where you have to cut into some type of cutting mat, usually like with the rotary. You're not cutting into this. This is just a track to protect the blade, that when you're cutting your strips, you can pop out those pieces without running your hand up against that metal. And it is, I mean, when you're holding it, when you talk about let me lock the, see, I love how those just lock in too. When you talk about the blade carriage, because the blade is really under there, kind of hidden, it's a very safe trimmer as well when you're working with it, especially if you're just carrying it around. It's super, super user friendly. All right, I'm just going to cut a couple more tags. Oh, there we go. Look at that. Yum. Yum, yum. So I've been cutting with this for, I don't know, probably well over a year, and I've done more than just your average cut. As you can see, I just slice and dice things because I want to put it through its paces, and that to me is the beauty of this. So that is the new rotary media trimmer. It's pretty interesting. I'm going to move some of this stuff out of the way because I don't want to confuse when I bring in the other trimmers. But I do want to just talk real quick, you know, from a size or scale comparison. So this one, from size, if you have the large guillotine, so it's like the 12-inch, so you can see just from size, it's pretty comparable. I'm gonna I'll just kind of bring it off camera. So, or maybe I can do it sideways. There you go, Captain Obvious. Look at that.
Captain Obvious is in
there you go. So you can see that size-wise, it's pretty similar without the handle or the arm. Again, this doesn't have that bottom ledge, and this, of course, is a guillotine trimmer, but size-wise, and this one is just maybe like 0.6 ounces lighter than this one. So from a size perspective, it's good, but I mean, you know me, we need all the tools. I need all the trimmers. I use this one probably more than most, but this has become my new go-to now just because I can just pick things up and I can cut much faster. But I still use this one just for like small little ephemera or snippets, because I find, you know, like smaller pieces, I just wouldn't grab this one for cutting smaller pieces unless I needed it specifically to cut chipboard. So smaller pieces, you know, I'll cut this, but you're going to see that it chews away at that. hold on. There we go. Didn't want to cut it. But it starts to chip away at this stuff, and that's why I don't necessarily like a guillotine for that. But, all right. Does the rubber piece ever need replaced? No, because again, it's not cutting into the rubber, as I described it. It's not cutting into that. It's just the material down there to hold the medium. So we just wanted something in there that was different than this hard plastic, because if your paper was in there, it's not really rubber. It's like another kind of plastic. You'll see it's not a cutting mat. And I wanted to kind of bring that up because, again, I've had all the types of trimmers. I mean, I have trimmers that, you know, spent $500-600 on back in the day when we were kidding for classes that we needed something to cut, but they're massive. There was never anything that was with the maker in mind, and that was the whole thing. Sure, there's other rotary trimmers out there. I'm not sure of rotary trimmers that can cut through chipboard and mat board like that, or anything that will cut through grunge board, but you know, maybe you don't care because you're not that kind of maker and all you're going to do is cut cardstock. But if that's the case as a maker, I still love the fact that I can take watercolor cardstock and I can do 3 sheets at a time. If I'm going to prep for class, or maybe I just want to do a bunch of card bases, or maybe you just want to do 1. Now 3, as I mentioned, 3 is going to give you a pretty good cut for the most part. You might get, I just call it like paper fuzz, but it's still a very clean cut. And then this one I'll put down at 1/4 inch, 4 1/4. So there you go. So that's 318-pound watercolor cardstock cut. So even from a card base, which would be good. Will it cut adhesive back vinyl? Absolutely, no problem, because that's synthetic. It's really good. Oh, Joanne, I ordered 25 minutes ago. Is it shipped yet? I know. This to me, it was a tough secret to keep, because we really wanted to do, you know, at least a 1.5 years of testing before we even brought it to market. But the fact that this was in development for 3 years, it did go through a lot of evolution until it was perfect. So a shout out to the team at Tonic, really for their patience and obviously investment in tooling something so incredible. A shout out to Richard for figuring all this out. I mean, because that is the engineering part, a reinforced steel so it didn't buckle when you were cutting through chipboard. A geared blade so it wasn't just dragging through stuff, because that was the other part, is that, you know, when you're cutting things like collage, a lot of times you're dragging through, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can cut it, but as a mixed media person, I often felt, well, you saw when I was just trying to cut through that little piece, your guillotine has resistance, and I don't want to screw up a guillotine just to cut it. So is it possible to cut it 6 1/4? Well, you can see right there that you would have to just make it up. So right there at the end of that black is going to be that mark. The grid goes up to 6, and then you could extend it beyond that. If you're a maker that 6 1/4 is your jam, then you would just go in and draw another line. So that would be good. Are there other blade kinds for this? No, because this isn't a decorative cutter. This is designed for cutting media. So this was really about creating that. Maybe a perforated blade would be cool, but certainly not little ziggity-zag or wavy things. Have I tried a sheet of foil? So yeah, metal foil tape. I don't know if I have a piece out, but yeah, if you look in the drawer, Mario, you'll see under metal foil, there's metal foil. Yep, top drawer. So yes, you can cut through metal foil, especially if you can cut it by itself, and you can also put it onto the top. If you're cutting through glimmer or decor foil, it is not meant for that. So if she's talking about thin foil sheets. No, that stuff is too flimsy. I was talking like actual aluminum. So this is adhesive back aluminum, and this is from Ranger. This will cut no problem. But if you're talking like foil cutters, no, just use the foil cutter or the knife. It's really not for that. It's not for thin, flimsy stuff. This is for media stuff. It's going to be your best bet. So I answered that about the fabric. That should take care of it. So no, not for thin things,
tools, though,
for media.
things.
Absolutely. So
we have one
that
trimmer
is-
in the closet. We spend $500 on.
Yes.
Remember back in the day?
and it won't cut through thick stuff. It
And
just cuts through
doesn't do
paper.
like a
No.
quarter what this does.
No, it just cuts through paper. But I mean, pretty cool. I think having a trimmer, having a tool really that's designed for any of our media, that was kind of my thing. Now, again, if you're doing fabric, if your fabric is attached to something, sticky back canvas on chipboard, yes, it will cut. But if you want a fabric cutter, just use a rotary cutter on a cutting mat, because you have to press in to cut those fibers. This is really for papers and
But no aluminum
cardstock.
cans,
So
I just
there we go.
answered someone, right?
I wouldn't.
No aluminum cans.
No,
I wouldn't.
I wouldn't. I mean, not in a flat trimmer like that.
Yeah.
Could it? I'm sure it could. I'm sure it could cut that weight of aluminum.
Why would you?
But if you wanted to take it out, you could. I know it would cut through that metal. Can you easily see to line up to cut? Well, that's a great question. I'll switch back and I'll just kind of explain how I see this trimmer, because that's a great question as far as cutting and visibility. So this is what this demo is all about. Okay. So if you're used to using a trimmer like this, where you know your cutting edge is right at the edge of your guillotine, that gives you visibility. This trimmer, you have to, it's going to be hard to see in the video, but you can see this metal edge. That is no different than the edge on a guillotine. So as a maker, if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to cut off this paper line, I can see, and I'll try to hold it up, I can see where the edge of my paper is to that metal. So I know that that's where it's going to cut it off. So I would say it's an interesting question, because when you're using it, that's one thing, but in camera, you're kind of not seeing where this is going. But as a user, I can see, like, okay, I can visibly see my metal edge. See, so it's going to keep all that texture in. So I think for visibility, yes, you can see it when you're using it. That to me is no different, I guess, than a guillotine, and I think that's the other beauty of it.